Welcome everyone to our first presentations of businesses downtown. I like to call it its heyday. We still have some heyday. Okay. I'd like to just give you a few examples of how the town grew. In 1870, there were 1,500 people here. By 1910, there were 4,000 people here. And you apparently know the answer to that question. Why did they grow in such a short period of time? Well, they heard of slate. And in 1891, there were 16 school manual blackboard factories in this town. They had one boiler room, I forgot this, one planing mill and one rolling mill. So you can see how the town grew because of slate. Now my next thing I'd like to announce, if there are any questions while we're doing these presentations, we'd like you to wait till after all the presentations are presented. If you have to do it while they're doing it, just go ahead and do it. So now we'll start with our presentations.
All right, so we're gonna follow the presentation pamphlet, but I'm gonna kind of ad-lib just really quickly for a second. If you can see the poster that I made up here, this is the 100 block as it stands today. We got Sunoco at the corner of Walnut Street and Main Street. We got the alley next to it, Boyer's Hardware, a residence, Sal's Pizza, and the trail with the trailhead, Railroad Street, Buzzy's, okay, and some residences on the other side of Main Street. Main Street didn't always look like this. I'm sure some of us in the audience here today know that for a fact, okay? If you picked up one of these maps that I printed out in the back, you know, and if you didn't pick one up, that's fine. There's extra copies later that you can pick up. You can kind of see how it's changed from 1896 to 1902, 1908, and 1913. So, you know, do that on your own time, but my presentation to start today is about the Lehigh Valley Railroad and the train station that is currently the trailhead, okay? I'm going to start first with the history of the railroad. My apologies, this might be a little longer-winded because there's a lot going on. The Lehigh Valley Railroad traces its roots to 1846, when it was incorporated as the Delaware, Lehigh, Schuylkill, and Susquehanna Railroad Company. And its main purpose was to haul anthracite coal from Mock Chunk to Easton. The railroad would run alongside the Lehigh River, and it broke the monopoly that the Lehigh Coal and Navigation and Company had on transporting coal. Little occurred in those early days until Asa Packer gained the majority control in 1851. He renamed that organization the Lehigh Valley Railroad in 1853, and the true construction began later that year. The first line opened between Easton and Allentown on June 11th, 1855. So this is before even Slatington was even incorporated as a borough. The section between Allentown and Mock Chunk then opened September 12th of 1855. When it opened, it broke the stronghold that the Lehigh Canal had on transportation as well. The railroad charged lower fees, and producers quickly switched from rail as a form of transportation. Within 2 years of its construction, the Lehigh Valley Railroad was carrying over 400,000 tons of coal per year. Many feeder railroads tied into it, and the organization began acquiring them and merging the system in 1864, the same year that Slatington was incorporated as a borough. In 1870, the Lehigh Valley Railroad ran from Easton in the south through Slatington with a spur route to Slatedale, through Mock Chunk, Whitehaven, Tunkhannock, Wyalusing, and Towanda, with a northern terminus all the way up in Waverly, New York. Spur routes at the time also existed off of Wilkes-Barre and Penn Haven Junction, which is kind of near where Lehigh Gorge State Park is outside of Jim Thorpe today. These specific spur routes zigzag throughout coal country with stops in Weatherly, Hazleton, Mahanoy City, Shenandoah, Centralia, and Mount Carmel. By 1884, the Lehigh Valley Railroad made connections from Easton through New Jersey into New York City. Other extensions occurred into the Finger Lakes, passing through Ithaca, Geneva, Cayuga, and Auburn, with a northern terminus at Lake Ontario. So there's a lot going on there. In addition to transporting coal and goods, the Lehigh Valley Railroad also conducted passenger service. In 1874, the Berks County Railroad met the Lehigh Valley Railroad at the train station that was in Lower Slatington. For many years through the 1940s, students from rural Berks and Lehigh counties rode the train, which was affectionately called the Berksy. The Lehigh Valley had many years of prosperity up to and through the Great Depression and World War II. In fact, the revenues for the railroad reached an all-time high in 1944 at $100 million. Two large blows to the organization occurred in the 1950s when the Interstate Highway Act was passed in 1956 and the St. Lawrence Seaway was opened in 1959. The interstate highway system helped the trucking industry offer door-to-door service, and the Seaway allowed shipments to bypass railways and go directly to overseas markets. By the 1960s, the railroads in the area were struggling to survive. By 1970, Lehigh Valley Railroad declared bankruptcy. It still remained in operation, however, until 1976, when it merged into the U.S. government's Consolidated Rail Corporation, also known as Conrail. This ended 130 years of existence and 121 years of operation on the railroad. The former train beds are now a portion of the D&L Trail in and around Slatington. So that's the history of the railroad. Now, let's talk about the actual Lehigh Valley Railroad in and around Slatington. Based on the 1914 publication, The History of Lehigh County, the railroad ran through downtown Slatington along the Lehigh River, and its depot opened in 1856. D.D. Jones, in his History of Slatington, found in the Slatington News in 1876, told that the settlement in and around the railroad was called Liberty. In 1864, Liberty, near the depot, Kernsport, downtown, and Waverly, uptown, merged to form present-day Slatington. One of our nation's finest gentlemen, President Ulysses S. Grant, visited Slatington in 1869, stopping at the depot. The Slatedale branch of the Lehigh Valley Railroad opened in 1870, per the Slatington News. Additionally, the Berks County Railroad, affectionately known as the Berksy, was opened at the Lehigh Valley Depot on June 24, 1874. The opening of these railways and the booming slate industry established our town truly as a place to live. Over the years, many businesses thrived, the richest Slatingtonians were millionaires, and the big wigs of Allentown trekked up to the country in the summer months for a reprieve from city life. In 1878, seemingly the first of a number of train accidents hit Slatington. An oil train traveling east on the Lehigh Valley Railroad collided with a freight train that had stopped in Slatington because of an overheated bearing. The oil train struck the rear of the freight train, pushing it into the Trout Creek Bridge and then into the creek itself. The cars piled up, an engine exploded, and the oil caught fire, resulting in a horrible inferno. At least 7 died and 52 were injured. Other accidents that were noted in our organization's 2014 Slatington History book occurred in 1890, 1900, 1913, and also 1925. There was also a Welshtown branch of the railroad, and it was constructed in May 1888. It also assisted in the transportation of goods to market. With all of these railroads converging in the area of the depot, which is the trailhead opposite Boyer's Hardware and Sal's Pizza today, it became natural for slate companies in the area to establish offices here. Tim Snyder is going to talk a little bit more about the history of those, but some of those companies included J.F. Unger, David Williams Slate, Lloyd Roofing Slate, and O.A. Miller Wholesale Roofing Slate. The 1989 publication Slatington and Surrounding Communities has a number of photos that document this, and they're also found, on our display tables as well today. Now let's talk about disaster and the end of the Lehigh Valley Railroad. The Lehigh Valley Railroad train station and ticket office, established at the location of the depot, was badly damaged when a train derailed and crashed into the structure on February 1st, 1969. A LVRR freight train en route to Newark, New Jersey, en route from Newark to Buffalo, New York, derailed at around 3 in the morning. The train contained 58 cars, of which 31 became derailed. A number of cars landed off the bridge over Trout Creek, some in the rail yard, and 2 also careened into the former station building. The building no longer accommodated passengers since passenger service was discontinued in Slatington in 1961. It was only used to store freight in the last 8 years of its existence. The Slatington station of the Lehigh Valley Railroad was promptly demolished within the week as the southern end of the roof collapsed, the rear of the structure buckled, and a gaping hole in the northeast corner of the station was found. Nearly 100 years of history, with the structure being built in 1877, met its end in this unfortunate accident. For those of you who are interested in finding out more about the Lehigh Valley Railroad, there's 4 places that I would highly recommend you check out. 2 are the publications on Slatington's history, 1989 Slatington and Surrounding Communities, 2014 Slatington at 150 Years, More Stories to Share. Believe it or not, there is a Wikipedia page online on the Lehigh Valley Railroad that I found a lot of this information from. And also, if you search the timeline of Slatington history by Charles Evans, he was a former professor at a community college in Northern Virginia and has ties to the area. His work is absolutely fantastic. So if you're interested in anything with the railroad, check out those locations. Okay.
This reminds me, this is not a prepared thing I'm going to tell you. It just reminds me today, a few weeks ago, well, longer than that. But anyway, I was told by my heart doctor that I needed a pacemaker. So I got one, and it worked so far. So far it's worked. But now, in addition to that, I was told by my heart doctor, you need a CPAP machine. I don't know, I see a few heads go like this. And I've had it now about a month, and I have 3 words for this. I hate it. It's a gadget that I have to put over my face. 2 types of mask, which I couldn't stand. I mean, I couldn't stand it at all at night. Then they have another piece that just goes under your nose, which I've been using now. But the problem is, I put it on, I can't fall asleep. I mean, who can fall asleep with some gadget, jabbing you in your nose? I can't. So I have to take it off at night. It's supposed to help you sleep. It's supposed to help you breathe. It does just the opposite. So I put it away, and during the day, when I'm awake, I put it on. So anyway, it's just reminding me of that. I'm going to talk about those 2 pictures, but those of you probably from the 2nd or 3rd row up back can't see them, so I made copies. And I made 20 copies, so couples, I appreciate it if you could share. probably third row back. There's 3 photos on there, so I'm going to talk about each one. There's only 2 up here now that you see, but there's 3 photos. I'll sort of wait till the photos get saturated a little bit. David Williams School Slate Factory. Anybody that knows me and about history in Slatington knows they're afraid when I get up here, because one thing, I won't shut up. I'm not really that much of a talker, but when it comes to history, especially Slate history, other than David Altrichter and Christy Haight, I probably get more involved than anyone else. But Slate, I think Petula Clark. How many of you here know Petula Clark? I think she came into Slatington and decided, I'm going to write a song. And you know what that song was? Downtown. I think that's where she got her idea from. All kidding aside. David Williams School Slate Factory. It was located down at the bottom of Main Street. There used to be a railroad there. I remember the railroad. Probably some of you old timers like me remember the railroad going there. Used to be now it's the D&L Trail. And as Mike said, the station was on the right. And over on the left, pretty much where the Welcome to Slatington sign is, pretty much where the big billboard is, was where the office of the David Williams School Slate was. This other picture, though, is taken, if you turn left here and go up, and you look from the north down to the south, you get an idea of how many buildings were involved in this factory. And it's 4 or 5 buildings that I see on the picture. Now don't get me wrong, I never remember this factory. So I'm only talking to you from what I've read and what I've seen. But you can see it was massive, the amount of buildings. The other thing that impressed me to no end is the number of railroad tracks. If you can see on the picture, you can look at your picture, there are two main tracks, I guess, one going north, one going south. Then there's a track that comes off the side, looks like it's going to the station, okay? Then there's a track, very faint, right here in front of David Williams School Slate Factory. So this is like Grand Central Station down at the bottom of Main Street in Slatington. Very, very busy. This map gives you, now this, along the side here, there's a telegraph pole, and there's a railroad. Well, if you walk up the trail and don't go up too far towards the airport, you look down, there's railroad ties. You look down, there's a section that even has the rails in it. So you can see that this is not a make-believe, it's still there. There are even, I think I counted 2 poles there that have the wires yet, left over from this day and age. It was started in 1874 and to 1917. It didn't last that long, 30, 40 years. There was the road, if you wanted to go up to Palmerton or Lehigh Gap or Slatington, there was no Walden Street over the hill at Rentschler. This is where you went. And the road went hugged along the railroad, and then bared to the left where the sewer plant is now, and connected with 873. So that's pretty much the location of the David Williams School Slate Factory. If you're nosy like I am, if you look closely at the writing on the David Williams School, it says something, the last words, you only see the last word, but I think I see the word slates, and I think I see the word mangles. So these factories apparently were capable of producing different product lines. They could change over from school slates to roofing slates, or to mantles for the fireplace, or to what they call flagging, pavements, or for curbing. You know, there's still some slate curbing in Slatington. You might not think so. When we moved into Slatington, when did we move in? 60? Huh?
66.
66, and our house on West Washington out front had the slate curbing, but the back walks were slate in our house too. So slate was still around there. Now, this busy downtown, as Mike was telling you about, all these trains going by, this slate didn't only come from this factory. Right down the road, right down that way north, was a guy by the name of Fulmer. And Fulmer was from Easton. And he had his hands in wherever there was a good investment. He's sort of like the guy nowadays, who is it, just bought the railroads. Your guy, Jim, huh? Buffett, not Jimmy, but Warren Buffett. I just heard in the news he bought half the rail transportation in the country. But anyway, so that Fulmer was like him, buying up. He built the Arlington. He took the U.S. Hotel and expanded it, made it bigger, and named it the Arlington Hotel. So he was into everything. So Fulmer's got a plan up here. I have maps that show that his buildings are there. Down this, where Walnut's Church Street, where Church Street comes down and meets Railroad, meets at Trout Creek there. On the riverside, there was an Unger slate factory. That shows up on the maps too. So right along the stretch here, they're pounding out slates. School slates, roofing, you name it. But that's not the only place. Right up around the bend, there's a cave. And along there, they have these factories booming out parts. You know, it ended up being Rudolph, but before that was the Bachman brothers, and before that was Robert McDowell. So the slate factories all over. Welchtown has them. Emerald has them. Slate Ale has them. Slate is coming in like crazy. Okay, enough of location and my talking about that. Oh, I blurted this out. In 1895, the largest roofing slate. Now this factory's talking about school slates, but one time they're making school slates, one time they're making roofing. But this talks about the largest consignment of roofing slate to go to one place in the Slatington News ever. There was 24 cars. So I looked up, I said, how long is the average rail car? I could guess, and they say the average car length is 90 feet. So if you take 24 cars from 90 feet, you got 2,160 feet, half a mile basically, not quite, of rail cars full with roofing slate, all going to the same place in St. Louis. So just to show you how active, boy, if only the time machine was ready to go, and you could turn it back to 1870 or 80 or 90 or whenever you want. Because to me, that was a real booming town. Okay, I talked about that. I talked about David Williams' bio. I should talk a bit about David Williams. That's his factory, but you should know a little bit about him. Oh, I want to show you this. This gets Mike's railroad and my David Williams sorted together. This is a photo I found in Slatington News. Maybe you've seen it. When was the accident down there? 60 what, Mike? 69. Okay, I think this is the accident. But it's coming down the side of the hill here behind the pizza place. It's a slate road going up to the quarry. Now, some of you know that quarry is still there, right? Some of you know there's a quarry yet in Slatington behind the pizza place?
It's slowly being built.
Huh? Well, that's still something. There's still a quarry. You can see slates there. My dad always told me that was a dump. That's all they ever said to us. They didn't talk to us about how wonderful and how great the slate business was. That was a dump. That's where we put our garbage, you know. And same thing outside of Wallingford. That's where I used to drive along out there and get rid of the garbage. But anyway, this picture shows a road going up to that quarry, which is still there. Okay. Let's see, David Williams. Okay, let's see what I got here on David Williams. Oh, incidentally, I'm confused when the factory closed down and was razed. I couldn't really find out exactly when. One source says that a guy named Albert Bittner from Wallaport, not the Henry I'm going to talk about later, Albert, that he leased Slatington's old Williams School slate factory and remodeled it as a site for producing silk fabrics. So that's one case. I read another article where it was demolished in 1913, so I'm not sure when it ended, but I never saw it. So you can certainly was, I guess, around that time frame. David Williams, well, I can tell you this. He came over here from Wales with his brother, Owen. And they moved into Lehigh Township area, across the river. And Owen got started, it says in the history that they worked and saved money, but I think they came over with some. So they bought land over there in Wallaport, and Owen was in the Wallaport area. There used to be a quarry at Paris Neckwear. I don't know if you gals that ever worked there, it's filled in now, but it was I didn't know it was a quarry. I just knew it as a hole in the ground. It was fenced in. How many of you ever saw that quarry? Any old quarries out in Danielsville and Berlin. So that's Owen. Now David, his brother, the guy we're going to talk about, he bought the land that had on it, and it was called the Heimbach Quarry Range. And the main quarry was Heimbach Quarry, because the farmer, I guess, owned the land, was Heimbach. And that's right outside of Wallaport. If you go past the old Kmart, you go down the grade and turn right on what's Eagle in German? Adler Drive, turn right, just go up a little bit, and on your right's a big water hole. Used to be used by Wallaport as a reservoir. I don't think it is anymore, but I could be wrong. And it's fenced in, it has a sign out, Heimbach Quarry. Up to the left, where Eugene Hankey, the plumber, used to live in a farmhouse, my son-in-law's cousin bought it, has a horse farm there now. But up behind her, there are two nice-sized quarries. Still, in fact, the one I see, they have shells there they use for shooting practice. But it makes me mad because I grew up just down the street from that on West Avenue, and my daughter said to me, "Dad, did you ever go swimming here?" I didn't even know they existed. So not only do we miss the quarries because of Slating, we don't even know they're there swimming. Had to come over to Slatington and go to Welshtown to go swimming in slate quarries. David Williams then decided, for some reason, he ran those quarries a while. While he was doing that, he bought a quarry and built his factory in Slatington. And there were two big quarries in Slatington. The one that's still there, part of it, which was called the David Williams Quarry, and one up the street, up the road, up behind Rentschler, which got filled in. And that was called the Riverside Quarry. And I assume they fed those three factories that were down along there. I assume that. David Williams, he also, for some reason, I don't know why or what, but he was probably the richest slate guy I can find. I don't know why. He must have known what he was doing. There were a lot of guys in slate. But he is written up, and even his will shows that that's true. He was the richest guy around in Slate. He built several homes in Slatington. You go past them when you go on Main Street. Downtown there on the left, that brick home. When I was growing up, Harry's lived in there. And Gordy Williams at the bank, he lived in there. You go up, the first house on the right on Main, after that building, I don't know what they do in that building on the corner. Used to be a gas station. What do they do there? They pinstripe cards or Notary Republic. Used to be a hot dog stand there at one time. The next house, Dr. Swingle was in there when I was growing up. That was David Williams' homestead. He went up to Center Street and he built 2 big homes up there on Center Street, which is still there. And he gave the land to build the church on Center Street, the Methodist Episcopal Church, which is still a building there. And we did that in our 89 book too. Okay, so I don't know how much more about David Williams I want to say. I want to tell you a little bit about school slates and school pencils, and then we're going to take a plant tour. A make-believe plant tour, of course. Or else there would be hard hats and safety glasses here for you to wear. But school slates. I want to... This is the super deluxe model. Usually they were just singles, but this one is 2 for the money. This is a great one. This was made by National School Slate in Slatington. Who knows? You know where that was?
Church Street.
Down 7th Street, come across 7th Street, across the creek, and later on the Krauses had that first cross, and then Pape bought that, and he ran it. So this was made though at National, but this is what a school slate was. Okay, there's only 3 things: slate, the wooden frame, and the strings around the outside tying the felt fast. When we get to the factory, when we go through the factory, they're going to see who's doing what and how many people are involved in making these school slates. Here's a single one. People go crazy with slates. You know, I have so many slates in the house that every organization practically makes. You know, Tom Jones, a cigar factory, and Slatington National Bank, and they're all. This was a popular thing to make school slates. Now, do you know what they wrote on the school slates with? What did they use to write on school slates?
Slate pencils.
Huh?
Slate pencils.
Slate pencils. Oh, I said that's wrong when I read that. We grew up in school, we had blackboards. We didn't have these things. We had pencil and paper by that time, but we grew up and we used chalk. I can remember the teacher, in those days, most of the women teachers were also the music teachers. Not always, but sometimes. And they had this thingamajig with the 5 for the you know, every good boy does fine, you know, and they would go right across the blackboard and they would make a music scale. And but so I thought, no, yes they do. They use, and I bought some. I couldn't find any. Louise and Rose gave me these, loaned these slates out to me from the school library, from the public libraries, but I couldn't find any pencils. Slate pencils. Now, how can you write on slate with slate? That to me didn't make any sense. But they sell them. I bought them on Amazon, and you can buy anything on Amazon. I think wives can get husbands and husbands can get wives on Amazon. I didn't check that out, but I wouldn't be surprised. But, you know, this is supposed to be, I think these pencils are cheaters, but I don't think they are really slate. They say they are. They call them slate pencils, real slate. But because they say when you use a slate pencil on a slate surface, it screeched. That doesn't screech. So that's what they claim. That's why they tried to get away from this, and they went to chalk. What's the thing that welders use? That white stone. Soapstone, they use that. They use different things because they didn't. But one thing I found out, not that you care, do you know what the number 1 use of slate pencils is now? You'll never guess. If I get anybody that guesses this one, I'll go back. What? It would be a younger person would probably know this. They sell these, and these slate, they're rectangular blocks, about 1/4 by 1/4 by 6 inches long, and they sell them. You can get them on Amazon, you get them anywhere on the internet. They bite them, they chew them because of so they say, the calcium in them. Yeah, you look it up. You don't believe me. I didn't believe it either. So I looked up slate pencils. And that's not what I was looking for. Okay. Factory description. I think I have something here to say though about pencils. Yeah, or school slate. Well, that doesn't tell us nothing. You have a picture there on your program of David Williams. You can see that. Here, what did I cut out here for school slates? A slate was a one-time purchase, and for practicing at something like penmanship or arithmetic, it wasn't practical to keep the work. Thank God, I wouldn't want my work kept anyway, you know. But you practice 2 times 2 is 6, you know. Oh, I don't want that, so you just erase it. But that doesn't work that well on a hard paper thing. But anyway, paper would have been reused to start the fire. The author's trying to say the only use of paper in that day and age when they had slate was to start a fire. They had no other use. They say the slate was flaked into thin sheets and cut to size. The average size was 8 by 10 and encased in the frame. Slates could be bound in a book to protect the surface, and similar were available for adults to jot notes and work math on. See how lucky you are. Huh? Now, there's a computer sitting right out in front of you. You get up in the morning, bing, 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 you know, any messages. And, well, when I grew up, because we didn't have that, any messages, you wrote down pencil and paper, or the phone rang. And when I first grew up, some of you, I hope aren't as old as me, but if you are, you remember, you even had to go through the party line. There was, you know, this where you call people up now, and at least then, when I got older, you could dial the number direct. Stella, will you get me Henry at What do you want with Henry? He was out last night drinking. You don't want to talk to him. Stella would stick her nose in with you, all that. Okay, that's enough of slates. Let's see about the factory. That's where we want to, here we go. This is now all about the factory. The school slate factory had an opening. This is David Williams' factory, I think, yes. Had an opening of 50 by 80 feet and a depth of 90 feet below the bed of the river, which wades its way through the valley in the vicinity of the quarry. A tremendous steam power is the manipulation of the mining of slate. Do you realize that the Lehigh River was at that time right up against the trail? They filled it in, but the river used to come around the island, hence they called it an island, because now it's not really an island. You have to stretch your imagination to believe it's an island now. But at one time the water came around it towards Slatington, and there was a gap in there, and you had to have the bridge to go over that arm of the river. Then you had the island, and then you had the Lehigh River. And I want to come back to one thing. I wasn't convinced that there were other school slate factories down here in Slatington. I wasn't convinced of that, so I got maps later on and it convinced me. But there's a fella here that convinced me. I said to him, you know, Brian, I said, you know, I'm reading somewhere where there was a guy named Fulmer who had a factory up behind or near David. Oh yeah, he said, my dad told me when he was a kid, they called that area Fulmerton. Right, Brian?
Fulmer Town.
Fulmer Town. But it's funny why, if David Williams is such a big wheel, why they didn't call it Williams? Well, they have a Williamstown and a Williams Fulmer. Why they didn't call it Williams whatever? They called it Williams Island, but they called that area Fulmer Town after Fulmer. David Williams' #1 enemy. They were constantly fighting in court. So anyway, I forgot to say that. The factory. Let's talk about the factory. They had all kinds of buildings, as I showed you, on this factory. There was a 40 by 18 foot area set aside to make Kane Victor's noiseless school slate. That was a big thing. Remember I was telling you about how they screech? Well, some people came around and said, we can make it that it doesn't squeak. They call it noiseless. I don't know how successful it was. Then there was a shaving house. Then there was a building 40 by 35, 2 stories high. What did that do? To make mantles, fireplace mantles. And then there was a flagging factory situated near the quarry. And that's all describing David Williams's quarry. But I want to get to going into the factory for this tour. I have an article here that describes the factory. The productions of Mr. Williams Industries reach an annual 3,000 squares of roofing slate. I don't know, so a square is some dimensional thing of slate. Over 1 million school slate, 26,000 feet of blackboards and mantles, plus a considerable quantity of flagging, floor tiles, slabs, etc. Is slate still a popular item for countertops or anything like that any of you use or have seen? Or I know about it for pool tables, and they do make pavers, I think, out of it also. Now let's go into the factory. Let's go into the factory. You have a handout from me that tells you about the factory, the breakdown of the labor. Where is that? We have to talk about this. Darn it. Who has a packet?
No, that's not it.
Who has a packet? Any? Thanks, Brad. This is a packet, an article I copied. School slate worker count. I worked in industry, metal working industry all my life, and you had to account for your labor costs. I was a production manager, and you had to keep your labor costs within reason, or we didn't pay to sell the product. The owners wouldn't make any money. So, and you had to know which this department did this. Oh, they use too much overtime. Their costs are up too high. So you had to monitor, measure your factory output and the cost and the safety. Here's what it took. Here's a table I found. Shows the different steps taken to finish slates for school slate use after they were split. I think you all know that slate came up. Big glob of slate, but it's split so easy. You take a chisel and hammer, a piece splits. That's one of the advantages of it. It's so easy to work with. Okay, so here, after these slates were split, as well as the total number of people required for one set of machinery, capable of turning out about 20,000 school slates a day. In one factory, in one town, in one country. Wales made us look like paupers in the amount of slate produced. But this was to produce 20,000 school slates a day. This is how the labor was distributed. You women should have lived then. You women should have lived back in 1870 to 1910. Because this factory to make these school slates employed 28 total people, 28 people to make these slates. And 24 of them were women. You could call your shots then, huh? Women's rights, this should have been an era of men's rights. Because they were hiring all these women. And why were they hiring the women? What did the women do? They sewed the cloth upon the frames. They stitched this stuff. These are thread, and this is felt. And they paid them manually to go around these slates. So it took 24 women on this assembly line or this production line to make these 20,000 school slates a day. It took, I mean, they hired a couple men, but not many. They had 14, 24 were women. They had, I gave you a bum figure. There were 28 women required, not 28 total, 28 women. There were 14 men required in addition to the women, half as many men as there were women. And what did the men do? They shaved the surfaces smooth. That's their main job. And then there were 4 boys, child labor. They did some gluing and placed them on the frame, etc., etc. So that's how the labor was distributed in David Williams School Slate Factory to make school slates. There was really one other thing here, but I guess I'm too full to get to it. That is why we're going to talk about Boyer Hardware. That is why we're going to talk about the Bittner House. That is why we're going to talk about grocery stores. All because of slate. It's just so phenomenal that this just came in here, and we know the records say 40% of the people were Welsh. From what I find, I'd say 70% of the people were Welsh. All of a sudden, Williamses and Roberts and Jones and Griffith and they came over here to work from Wales to work because they got paid better in the equality somewhere here. Well, oh, I know. I have a book. This is David Williams' grandson, contributed to the Lehigh County Historical Society, and he grew up on the farm over at Heimbach. So this isn't about the Heimbach quarries, so I can't say too much about that, but I would like to say about the wages. Here we are. What do you think the average wage was this was 1890. What do you think the average wage, these are men though. The women probably paid less to sew these things. The average wage in the quarry, which I think might be a little higher because of the safety factor, but I don't know that. That's like it, was 18 cents an hour. 18 cents an hour, yep. A lot of them were making 15 and 12 cents an hour. And so it gives you a better idea, a picture of the slate business, the school slate business, and what went on in Slatington. Okay, now we're going to go to a market. Who is taking care of the market? Robert is filling in, I guess. He'll probably tell you about that, about one of the Kearns markets.
Susan Kern couldn't be here today, so I'm going to be filling in and talking about one business that would be on the southern side of the 100 block of Main Street, which was Kearns Market. On Thursday, April 15th, 1937, the newly modernized A.A. Kearns Market in Lower Slatington held a grand reopening. The market was located on the southern side of the 100 block of Main Street, approximately at today's address of 139 Main Street. According to an article in the Slatington News, the market has been completely modernized with the latest type fixtures and refrigeration and can carry a complete stock of fancy groceries, fruits, vegetables, and Kearns quality dressed meats. The festivities were to start at 7 p.m. with free lunch, samples, and plenty of door prizes were to be given out. The article also noted that opening specials would be offered Friday and Saturday, as well as gifts to the first 100 customers on both days. The article concluded by saying the market will have a truck for free immediate delivery service. Amandus A. Kern, 1850 to 1908, known as A.A. Kern, operated a butchering business with a slaughterhouse on West Franklin Street in Upper Slatington. He operated 2 retail outlets in the borough, plus he also had several horse-drawn butcher wagons for the road. The retail end of his business was known as A.A. Kern Meat Market, and after Amanda's death in 1908 was run as an estate, the A.A. Kern estate, for 25 years. His widow, Maria Kern, ran the operations, and she resided in the large home on the northeast corner of 5th and Washington Streets in uptown Slatington. Some of you in the audience older than 45 or 50 years old that had Truck Roberts for history class in 8th grade may remember watching old movies of Slatington showing the cattle drives up Main Street. The cattle were unloaded into the cattle pens at the Lehigh Railroad Station and then driven up Main Street to the slaughterhouse located between Franklin and Church Streets. Oftentimes they hindered traffic, which on occasion resulted in smashed windows for shopkeepers. Butcher wagons were often tied to lampposts throughout town as drivers stopped for lunch. The wagons were, of course, without refrigeration and came to the customer's door, which in some ways was faster and more convenient than purchasing meat today. Amanda's son, George, 1873 to 1966, was also active in the family meat market business until his death at the age of 92. George's son, Lee Kern, 1902 to 1989, worked in the family's meat business as well. He, along with his father, owned and operated the George A. Kern and Son meat business for 40 years until he retired in 1957. The specials for the grand opening on Lower Main Street included an assortment of Heinz brand products, cakes, cookies, canned goods, assortment of cheeses and dressings, and food baskets. The grand prize of the door prizes was a 15-pound Wilson ham, and people were reminded to register according to the newspaper article. One lucky winner on Friday night was given a 15-pound high-grade ham, and on Saturday night, a 15-pound Wrath ham. Another advertised special to the first 100 customers on Friday and Saturday who spent $1 or more would receive a free shopping bag containing merchandise, samples, recipes, and bags, and the bags had a merchandise value of over $1. As a side note for you who may be interested in the brands of hams and not really familiar with the names, as I was, Wilson Meats were located in Chicago, Illinois, and have been around since at least 1920. High Grade Food Products Corporation started a line of smoked meats in 1907, and by 1946 they operated 60 plants selling practically every kind of meat. Wrath Packing Company was started in Waterloo, Iowa in 1891 and was in business until 1985. At one time, they were the largest meat packing facility in the country. Now pay attention to these prices listed in the newspaper ad for this grand opening. I'm sure we'll all be envious of the prices in which they were low today. Mixed vegetables, 21 cents. Shredded wheat, 2 packages for 23 cents. 10 pounds of sugar, 51 cents. Bananas, 5 pounds for 25 cents. Iceberg lettuce, 2 for 17 cents. Eggs, 28 cents a dozen. Imported Swiss cheese, 69 cents a pound. Land O'Lakes butter, 42 cents a pound. And new potatoes, 6 pounds for 30 cents. As far as A.A. Kern's home-dressed meats, chuck roast, 28 cents a pound. Pork shoulders, 26 cents a pound. Whole hams, 23 cents a pound. Ring bologna, 28 cents a pound. Ground hamburger, 28 cents a pound. And fresh killed chickens for 29 cents a pound.
All right, we've been talking a lot about the past, so let's talk a little bit about the present. Well, not really. But I think if you can answer this question, you know where we're going. What business is the largest firearms dealer in the Lehigh Valley? Boyer's Hardware, right? Okay. So, of course, anyone who is native to Slatington or at one point in time has driven through Slatington has heard of Boyer's Hardware. Potentially of more impressive fame, though, A.F. Boyer Hardware can lay claim to being the oldest hardware and firearms store that has remained within the same family in our entire nation. Okay, so that's something that's big. At least that's a claim that I've heard. So the 100 block of Main Street as it stands today is incomplete without 3 big establishments. Buzzy's Auto Body Shop, Sal's Pizza, and of course A.F. Boyer Hardware. But it might surprise everyone, and it very much surprised me, that this was not the first location of A.F. Boyer Hardware, based on the information that I've found. Brothers Abel and Henry Boyer were not even original to Slatington. They grew up in Lower Tolmensing Township in Carbon County, near Aquashikla. Their future business was first established, again, this is a claim that I've heard, okay? Their future business was first established by Edwin Rock in 1867. The Boyers did go into trade with Rock just 1 year later, okay? So it's been in the Boyer family since 1868. Rock was involved with the hardware business, however, until April 1893, even though the name was changed to Boyer and Brother, already starting in 1868. Originally, the hardware store that would become A.F. Boyer's was located in the 600 block of Main Street, uptown, near where the Slatington Public Library is today, in that block. Not quite sure where in that block. I wasn't able to uncover where, but it was in that block. They later moved to 314 Main Street. That used to house John Schleicher's candy store. Okay, so if you think about that, near Bechtel's Pharmacy. The last move happened based on newspaper articles in 1925 when they moved to their final location at 130 Main Street. For a moment, though, I'd like to turn our attention to the history of the building and not A.F. Boyer's Hardware. So the building at 130 Main Street. The structure there was built around 1908-09 per the county assessment records and also the maps that were handed out when you came in. It originally was owned based on a newspaper article by Faber and Son. I think the newspaper screwed it up, and I think it really meant Farber and Son. I think they missed an R because there was a member of the Farber family that owned it later, and I really truly believe it was Farber and Son. This was a grocery store. The property and business was then sold to Victor Bittner, who owned a grocery business and a confectionery business. He was related in one way, shape, or form to the same Bittner family of Bittner House fame across the street. Unfortunately, the venture wasn't made to last, and he sold the property to Charles C. Farber just 1 year after he bought the property himself in 1901. Charles Farber owned and operated Farber's department store from 1901 to 1925. And before you ask about Charles Farber, yes, he is related to the extended Farber family that we all know in and around Slatington. Those people are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of his brother, Harry Farber. Charles C. Farber originally remodeled the building to open a cigar and tobacco store. It then later became a 5 and 10 cent store. In 1925 was when Farber sold the property to the Boyers. Now let's go back to the Boyers family and the history of the business. Brothers Abel F. Boyer and Henry P. Boyer were the original owners. The family-owned business is now 5 generations strong. Ownership of the business went through Henry's descendants, although the true namesake of the company was his brother Abel. The following lineal descendants of Henry owned, operated, and managed A.F. Boyer Hardware: Abner F. Boyer, Alden F. Boyer, and then Alden's wife Dorothy, who managed the store following his premature death in 1973 until their son could take over. And their son was Alan F. Boyer, and the current manager of business operations is Abel F. Boyer. So everyone has still continued the A.F. Boyer name. As one final interesting tidbit of information, bulk items at the store are still weighed using a cast iron scale that was almost certainly used by the Boyer brothers when they first founded the business in 1868, and potentially even earlier from when Edwin Rock was involved. The state's weights and measures inspectors still give it a passing grade every year, and it is deserved. It's not just giving it. It is tested every year. So there is the history of Boyer's Hardware. Next up, we're going to be going across the street and talk about the Bittner House.
Same bit, third row back, hang them out.
You'd think he's the teacher.
The Bittner Haas Hotel, I think probably many of you here, most of you here probably remember, because it was there. Don't have the year up there now. I have everything pre-fire time and nothing. I know I have post-fire time or during fire time. All I got to do is find it. There we go. Okay, until the fire which occurred in 1977. So that's what, 23 and 23, 46 years ago. So anybody that's much over 46 there possibly, probably remembers the fire. But let's talk first about the hotel. Before it became the Bittner House, there was another hotel there. Not quite as glamorous, not quite as big. From the write-ups I'm going to share with you in the Slatington News is, the only thing I can think of in today's day and age is this must be a Conrad Hilton hotel. This must be a Donald Trump hotel. Because, oh my goodness gracious, all the write-ups make this place so fabulous. Because of its size and because of its accommodations. However, don't forget, right up the street was a hotel called the Arlington Hotel. And if you've seen pictures of the Arlington Hotel, they look like they're brother and sister. Same size, same shape, seems to have the same amenities. So, but then you go up the street and there was a Kern had a hotel up there at the bottom of the hill, the big brick thing. I know Nick Smith was in there later on. So there was a big hotel. And then uptown there were, look at the Neff House. That's about the size that the Bittner House was. We still have it remaining. You know, who knows how long. Slatington does have somewhat of a reputation of not raising, but raising historical buildings and artifacts. So let's hope it stays there. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the situation for previous hotels. This is an article I found. It says the first hotel in what is now Slatington was a stone building on Main Street in the lower part of town, occupied as a private residence, built by George Kern in 1824. Who knows where that's at? That's still there. The building's still there. Bechtel's is only down the street from it. Bechtel's Pharmacy there, that's the old stone building. That has up on the top 1824. Then when this was written, it was used as a carriage shop, and when this article was written, and a bar, in the barn connected with the hotel until 1840, then it closed. Okay, the second hotel was built by Jonas Kern and helped by different other landlords, but that ended up closing. That's the big Kern building down at the bottom of Main Street Hill if you're going up the hill on the left, before where the rolling mill used to be. Now, the next hotel, they say, so these hotels are gone. They didn't last. The next hotel was in Upper Slatington, and that was the Neff House. And that had several owners. And the Neff House, like I said, has still stayed. The Railroad Hotel at the depot was built in 1851. So you can see that it was built, what, 36 years before Henry Bittner got involved and renovated it and rebuilt. I can't tell you what he did. I can't tell you if he blew up the railroad house, if he ripped it down, if he just made it look better or what. I can't tell you. There are articles I've copied, and maybe I can share with you, on while they're building the Neff House, the Bittner House, that leads one to believe that they're starting from scratch. But don't quote me on that. I don't know for sure how the railroad house became the Bittner House, other than from what I've read size-wise, the railroad house was pretty small potatoes compared to the Bittner House Hotel. Then there was downtown the Eagle Hotel. Somebody called me a couple of years ago and said, "Tim, where was the Eagle Hotel?" They saw an article in the Slatington News that when the Berkshire students, remember back to the Berkshire, the railroad, all this stuff gets intertwined. The Berkshire students would leave the high school and they would walk down Main Street to get on the Berkshire down at the railroad station. That's where it stopped when it brought them in. So they were on their way down, they would stop at the Eagle Hotel and they would get an ice cream cone. So this person said to me, "Where was the Eagle Hotel? Was that one of those Kern buildings, or was that the Arlington?" No, I researched it. That was run by a guy named Israel Rudy, R-U-D-Y, famed artist in that from Shakespeare. And I found more information about it. But anyway, the Eagle Hotel was built by Israel Rudy in about 1856. So all these things are starting to come together. The station, the railroad's coming through. David Williams' thing didn't kick in yet, but they're starting to build up. Then there was a United States Hotel. That was the one that later became the Arlington. Then there was the Mansion House. And there was the Broadway. The Mansion House was on Main Street, pretty much across the street from the library. Somewhere in that block. I saw that on one of those Sanford insurance maps. And the Mansion House and the American, well, that was that was a Kern also. So anyway, those were the hotels that were springing up because of Slate, because of all the activity going on. They did other things in these hotels besides eat and sleep. My dad and my uncle told me they played pool. That's all I ever heard about. Was the pool game and the poker game in the basement in the Bittner House. But prior to that time, those were meeting rooms, and all these big executives from this railroad company and that Slate company needed a place to stay when they had their meetings. So they would stay over in Slatington, and they had to have a place to stay and hold their meeting. Plus clubs and other groups would meet quite often in these hotels. Now, I have here somewhere an advertisement for the Railroad House. See, Henry owned it as the Railroad House too. Then he changed it over to the Bittner House. So the railroad, this is an ad that's in the Slatington News. The Railroad House, A and H Bittner, two brothers, were proprietors. I guess back in the day, the Pennsylvania Dutch, the Pennsylvania Germans didn't want to be outdone by these Welsh people coming in and taking everything over. So people like Bittner's not only had hotels, they also had what else down on Cherry Street? The mill, the big mill down, it's still there. One of the Bittner brothers owned the mill down there. So they were into a lot of things. Here's an ad for the Railroad House, before the Bittner House. It is a large two-story building. So you see, small. Bittner 4. The Railroad House 2. conveniently arranged, and is one of the best kept hotels outside of the large city. Meals can be had at short notice. I guess I was sort of like a precursor to our takeout. I don't know, short notice, what that meant, whether you could, they didn't have telephones, so I don't know what that meant. You could go in and you didn't have to sit and wait. Maybe they had extra cooks on duty or whatever. But anyway, you could get a meal quick. Travelers who arrive at Slatington with the late trains ran here for lodging for the night and breakfast in time to depart with the next train. So that's an ad in the Slatington News for the Bittner Haus. Oh, and then they had it's just what the hungry and the weary and the most, I don't know, tedious, I don't know what that word is. In short, just what everybody wants. So you can see they really had it all. That was the cat's meow there. They had a great restaurant. Okay, that's the Railroad House. Now Henry Bittner started to build his place. These are some articles I got from the Slatington News. On Saturday last, this was 1887, August. On Saturday last, the bricklaying for the new Bittner Hotel in Lower Slatington was completed. An idea of the vastness of the building cannot be obtained. It makes an impressive appearance. A large workforce of carpenters have been assigned, and the work of completing the building will be pushed vigorously. I was thinking we should get those guys for the elevator. Huh? Anyway, Louise doesn't like when I tease her about that. Okay, here we go. Now here we got Henry Bittner. This is not this is a continuation. The new hotel of Henry Bittner at Slatington, it's a model of architectural design and reflects credit on that town. This is really something. Mr. Bittner is an enterprising and progressive citizen, as well as a genial, whole-souled fellow, whom it will be well for the Lehightonians to remember when they visit that city. So they're really bragging this up. Slatington had a newspaper and bragged everything up. Unfortunately, now we don't have a newspaper, but what would they brag up anyway? So we don't have hotels. We don't have slate factories. We don't have all these good things we once had. How many doctors did we have? When you read?
Doctors.
How many?
9 doctors.
9 doctors in Slatington. Can you believe that? At one time. Now we have.
Well, we have pharmacists, one.
Well, these are doctors. These are like I go to Schnecksville for, you go to Wallingport for, or you go to Palmerton for. You don't got them in Slatington? Okay. Here we go. The building is of the Queen Anne style of architecture, and its dimension and in dimension is most spacious. I'm just going to pick a sentence or two out. The main entrances, 2 in number, from Main and Railroad front the middle of the building. The interior arrangement is especially adapted for convenience. The first floor is a maple in double layers. Over the office of the second floor is a large double parlor. Oh, it just goes on and on and on. So you almost have to not want to go anywhere in the hotel to stay away from this, because this is so fabulous according to the write-ups. This is the construction of it. Opened in 1888. Did I share? Here's another opening. Did I share this with you? That the most auspicious affair that probably ever happened in Slatington was a formal opening of the magnificent new 4-story hotel. So it was a big deal if it wasn't at least the Slatington news thought it was. Now, we're going to get to the... Do most of you remember this hotel? Right. Who remembers this hotel? When I was a kid, didn't and I saw him here. Where is he? The Iron Man. Didn't I see him here? Huh?
Yeah, he had to leave. It's Rich.
Didn't Torby's mother own that? Grace. Yes. That's all I remember. I don't remember any of the other owners. Okay, the fire. We went from this to that. And I'm talking to people here, of course I'm pretty old, so to me they're young. But there are people here that say, yeah, I can remember that. That thing was shooting up in the sky like crazy, those flames from the fire in 1977. Here are some articles, newspaper articles about it. I've just skimmed 2 different articles about the fire. The historic Bittner House at 101 Main went up in flames today in a fire described by witnesses as one of the biggest fires in Slatington in recent years. I would have thought it was the biggest fire ever in Slatington, but it said in recent years. But Robert, you did did fires and catastrophes in Slatington for the 1940 book. And I'll tell you, he listed, and I'm sure he hit the highlights, the fires, didn't you? There were a lot of them. That darn school slate factory at the cave, at the tunnel, at the bed bug, that thing constantly burned every year. It was a slate factory burn, a mattress factory burn, constantly going on, a lot of fires. Okay, firemen from Slatington, Freedom, Waldorf, Poland, and Heighton, and Lehigh Township were concentrating their efforts. Witnesses said firemen appeared to have a problem with water pressure. We wouldn't have that now, Brian, right? No problem nowadays with water pressure. Got that water condition all under control now. But back in '77, in fact, you were just a kid then, so you had nothing to do with it then. But anyway, the 3-story frame and brick hotel, which once was a fashionable plush way station for weary railroad travelers, had been condemned after a fire last Christmas. I wasn't thinking about this when I said fires were prevalent in Slatington, but this one was a bang bang one year and then the next year again. And the hotel's 2 bars, oh, this is major. The 2 bars in the hotel were closed 2 weeks ago. So I'm sure somebody was unhappy with that and maybe led to this arson, I don't know. But anyway, the fire was discovered at 1:23 a.m. by a Slatington policeman on patrol. He railroad the communication center. We need a lot of equipment. It's really going, he said. So hundreds of spectators watched as flames shot 60 feet in the air. One person said they could see it from Route 145 about a mile away. And it looked like a giant gingerbread house. No injuries were reported. They were also watering down the front of Boyer's Hardware across the street from the fire because of the heat and the spark. So they almost got rid of 2 of our memorial type of historic buildings. The other account pretty much says the same thing. But I thought I saw something in here about injuries or something. More than 85 firefighters from 8 volunteer companies fought the blaze. It threatened nearby homes and businesses. Douglas McGeorge was the owner. Her name mean anything to anybody? Douglas McGeorge was the owner. He estimated the property with furnishing might carry a total value of about $60,000. it means to me there wasn't too much in it. Even that was back in '77 though, but still, it's not a lot of money from the way the hotel is bragged up. A crane later was used to knock down the front and rear walls. I thought I saw somewhere where someone was injured, but apparently not. Apparently I imagined that. So that is the story. You know where Henry Bittner lived? On Main Street, beautiful Victorian home. I don't know what the house number is. If you're going north from the light, 1, 2, 3 homes there, 3 or 4 homes, 8, what's her name? Lived there. No. Who? Ida Hausman. Ida Hausman lived in there. Huh?
Ida Hausman, I knew, lived downtown.
Well, that's where we are, downtown.
Going up Main Street, sorry.
He built that home, and I guess that's all I have to say about the Bittner house. Anything on questions or anything on the Bittner house?
What was the cause of the fire? Was it arson or did
They said, the original thing said here they didn't know. But that's something I can research. I don't know. I'm sure they formed the committee investigation, and I'm sure they looked at it.
From what we heard, it was arson. Supposedly somebody poured flammable liquid, something in the stairwell, and that's why it went up so much. That's what we heard from firemen that were here at that time.
Okay. Beautiful structure, beautiful structure. I wish, there's a lot of older structures that don't remain anymore. But unfortunately, I don't think it would remain in that pristine condition. It would be torn into apartments and who knows what else. But it would be nice if that could have been maintained and could have been restored. Now.
Okay, before I speak about the Vigilant Fire Company, I'm going to talk about a few buildings and businesses formerly located on the northern side of Main Street in the 100 block and one located near Trout Creek. We already talked a little bit about J.F. Unger Blackboard Factory, but I just want to add a little bit more to that. The factory was started in 1883 by John Unger and manufactured slate blackboards and structural slate using locally quarried slate. The frame factory was located between the Lehigh River and the Lehigh Valley Railroad at the outlet of Trout Creek. John Unger successfully ran the business for many years until his death in 1909. After that time, his estate conducted the business for several years under the name J.F. Unger Company and sent their slate products to all parts of the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. I also want to talk about the United States Express Company. Approximately at the location of present-day Sal's Pizza was a business known originally as the Adams Express Office. Hiram W. Hankey, son of Hiram I. Hankey and Elizabeth Klaus, was born in Slatington in 1859 and attended the local public schools. At the age of 14, while still attending Slatington schools, Hiram operated the Express Office, which later became the United States Express Company. Hiram was involved with this business until his death in 1919. Hiram's father, Hiram I. Hankey, was involved in many things in the northern Lehigh community, such as teaching, working for the railroad, slate quarrying, real estate, school director, and most notably commissioned Justice of the Peace in 1881, beginning a long line of Hankey men who served as JP. Some of you may remember Willis Hankey, who served from 1952 until 1982, first as JP, then as District Justice. His office was eventually located on the first floor of the Vigilant Fire Company building where we're here today, beginning in 1969. Express offices were from a bygone era when trains handled virtually all interstate and intrastate transportation. These express offices performed a vital need in conjunction with the railroads. Before the days of UPS and FedEx, the best way to ship parcels was of course via the railroad through these express agencies, which provided door-to-door service throughout most of the continental United States. Once a package arrived at a local railroad depot, the on-duty agent would personally deliver the package to their intended recipient. In addition to his duties with the Express Office, Hiram partnered with David Morris in 1893 to organize the Morris Slate Company, which employed 50 men and was engaged in the manufacturing of roofing slates, blackboards, and school slates. The David Morris Quarry was one of David Williams' abandoned quarries and located along Railroad Street north of present-day Sal's Pizza. Hankey also served as director in the Slatington Electric Street Railway. In 1876, Hiram enlisted in the Pennsylvania National Guard Company E. He first served as first and second lieutenant, and in 1885 was elected captain of the company, holding that esteemed position for a total of 5 years. In 1891, Hankey was appointed to serve the unexpired term of Justice of the Peace following his father's death on November 10th. The following year, Hankey was elected to the position and held it until his death in 1919. As a side note, one of Hiram's children, Norwood, followed in his father's footsteps and became agent of the Express Company after his father's death in 1919. The company changed names 2 more times, first to the American Railway Express Company and then to the Railway Express Agency. And oh yeah, Norwood Hankey also became Justice of the Peace. A few feet west at 116 to 118 Main Street, beginning in the 1940s, was Krause's Luncheonette. Elmer Krause and his wife Anna Mary Halko owned this business from 1940 until 1971. Elmer was also was affiliated with the Bittner House across the street and the nearby Arlington Hotel, which we spoke about earlier on the northwest corner of Main and Walnut Streets. Elmer owned and operated pool halls in both these establishments. Elmer was affectionately known as Fat Krause to his patrons. The business contained pool tables, a back room where men would play cards, and in the front of the business, hot dogs were sold with all the trimmings. In the 1950s, guys in high school would pack into cars and head downtown during their lunch break to indulge in fat dogs, as they were called. And they would hold contests to see who could eat the most hot dogs. Fat Krause had one of the earliest TVs in town, and children would often sit on the benches near the lesser-used pool tables to watch their favorite shows. Later, Stephen Chumpy Kirshner took over the operation and ran a similar business at the same location during the 1980s and 1990s. He was also known for his hot dogs and had a room in the back where locals played cards and gambled. He ran the business from 1984 to 1994. Further up the block was the Eagle Hotel, which Tim had already talked about. It was located at the corner of Iron Alley along Main Street up towards where the current gas pumps are at the mini market. The hotel opened in 1856 and for several years was run by Dennis Miller, a saddler by trade. Dennis's grandfather, Thomas Miller, was proprietor of the Levan's Hotel located in North Whitehall Township. One of Dennis's son, Thomas, was also associated in the hotel business, becoming the head of the American House Hotel in Slatington for 1 year beginning in 1907. A few years later, in 1910, he became proprietor of Levan's Hotel. Lastly, I'm going to be talking about the Vigilant Fire Company, not where we're located today, but on Lower Main Street. 7 years after Hose Company No. 1 was organized on 4th Street in 1885, concerned citizens in Lower Slatington, known as the Third Ward, realized that one fire company could not adequately serve the needs of the borough and its increasing growth. On October 19, 1893, led by Elias Gurman, they organized a fire company. I'm not going to read all the organizers, but it read as a who's who of prominent men in Slatington around that time. But some of the notable people involved in the fire company at this time were Abel Boyer, Henry Bittner, and Doc Holben. Several weeks later, the company was holding their meetings at the rear of a barber shop on Main Street, which was borough property. This location, from what I gathered, was near where the Walnut Street Bridge now meets Main Street. In the early days, the company relied on their brothers at Hose Company No. 1, who provided the Vigilant with lanterns, axes, and some sort of hand-drawn chemical engine hose cart. A chemical engine was a large cart-mounted fire extinguisher using firefighting chemicals rather than water. By December, the name was changed to Vigilant Fire Company, and articles and bylaws were adopted. On December 21st, the Vigilant men fought their first fire at Joe Custard's foundry located on Factory Street, and I'm happy to report the firemen passed their first test and successfully extinguished the fire. The following year, on April 19, 1894, the fire company was officially chartered by the state legislature. 3 days later, the company accepted its first invitation to attend a firehouse dedication in Lehighton. Needing accessories for their attire, host company number 1 sold the Vigilant their belts for 35 cents apiece. A year later, the Slatington News noted in an article on November 11th that the fire company was erecting a new firehouse on land adjoining the Quincy Jones grocery store in Lower Slatington. That location would be what is now the right travel lane heading south from the Walnut Street Bridge right at Main Street. The article noted that a connection has been made with a water main and all modern improvements will be added. It was noted that the new home will be used exclusively as a meeting place. In 1897, realizing the need to fight fires in all parts of town, the fire company informed the Borough Council that it needed a hose carriage and horse to haul their equipment. Around the turn of the 20th century, the company felt the need to have a new firehouse. And another reason for this that may have precipitated the move was the construction of an iron bridge traversing Trout Creek connecting South Walnut Street with Main Street. On February 29, 1901, the first meeting was held in the new hose house, during which time the borough presented 50 keys to the company. Specifics were not listed in the company minute books detailing the events of the new hose house. The location is now what is now the northeast corner of Main and Walnut Street, approximately at the location of the gas price sign at the mini market. The company received numerous gifts for its new house, but one notable gift was a 32-volume set entitled History of the World, which no doubt found its way into the bathroom. In 1903, the company began a junior firemen's category of membership. These junior firefighters, some children of officers and firemen in the company, were given their own hose cart and provided with uniforms to accompany the men in parades. That actual hose cart, now in its 120th year, is right up front here. A few years later, in 1906, the Borough Council gave permission to have an addition built to the rear of the fire company. Company records do not detail the purpose or extent of the addition, but Council was given permission to hold its meetings in the building. On April 17, 1907, the first of 3 fires in the history of the fire company occurred at that firehouse. The other 2 were in this building. The fire was caused by a gas jet in the basement that set fire to the first floor. The fire ate through the flooring, causing $100 in damage. There is some discrepancy when the first piece of motorized equipment was acquired, but in other written histories it is noted that in 1924 the company obtained such an apparatus. Prior to this, the Vigilant utilized the steam engine-operated pump pulled by horses rented from Bittner's livery stable across the street from Henry Bittner. During the 1920s and 1930s, the fire company continued fighting fires and attending 4 county firemen's parades and attending yearly state firemen's conventions. On June 17th to 18th, 1921, the Vigilant Fire Company, along with Hose Company Number 1, jointly hosted the 4 county firemen's convention and parade in Slatington. The Slatington News reported on the festivities and parade, noting that the banquet prepared for the delegates in the high school gymnasium was the most elaborate affair ever held in the history of the association, as the committee received much praise. The article went on to say that one delegate, leaving on the last train, expressed his sentiments when he yelled, "Goodbye, old Slatington, we had a grand time." Maybe he was drunk, I don't know. Also during this time, the company formed a baseball team and entered the Suburban League in 1932. One of the uniforms from that time period is hanging over on the wall there that you can check out after the meeting. It is a very heavy wool uniform, and I can't imagine playing baseball in something like that in the summer, but they did. In 1930, talk began about finding a suitable location for a new firehouse, and a committee was formed but lacked success. In 1939, a proposal was made to put the firehouse in Victory Park. By 1940, things became more serious as a building committee was formed in order to construct a new firehouse and a youth center, and began raising funds. All sort of locations were investigated, including the Bittner House, the old circus grounds near where Rentschler's car dealership is now located. As the 1940s came to an end, the company was no closer to finding a location and building than they were 20 years earlier. Just real quick, 3 notable motions were made by the membership in the 1940s. A ladies' auxiliary, the backbone of many fire companies, was created on March 7th, 1940. An address worn by one of the auxiliary members working at the fire companies hanging also on the wall back there. On January 8, 1942, members serving in World War II were granted an exemption from paying membership dues for the duration of the war. And on April 1st, 1943, permission was granted to begin bingo operations with the Ladies Auxiliary. In 1950, finally, things began to come together for a new building. After Doc Holben's house was nixed as a location, property on South Walnut and East Church Street was explored. On October 20th, 1950, during a special meeting, those in attendance voted unanimously 20-0 to purchase the Walnut Street property for a sum of $900. In 1951, a new building committee was formed and an architect was hired. At this time, it was decided that each member of the fire company be contacted to purchase at least 5 concrete blocks to help defray the cost of the building. In April 1952, Charles Yale was named general contractor for the project. On July 31st, 1952, a 50-year lease agreement with the Borough of Slatington and the Vigilant Fire Company was signed. Construction continued throughout 1953, and many of the members of the company were skilled construction workers, and they donated countless hours laying block, pouring concrete, and roofing the building. Other members canvassed the neighborhood by selling blocks. 2 local businesses were a huge asset to the project, Henry Orkin and the Kern Lumber Company. Orkin donated a crane to lift the steel beams into place, and Kern donated trucks so that members could drive to Lehighton to pick up cement blocks. If the members loaded the trucks themselves, the blocks cost 30 cents versus 35 cents if workers in Lehighton had to load them. A November 19th, 1953 Slatington News article indicated the building was nearing completion and the company's old quarters on Main Street would be put up for public auction as no bids were received to purchase it. The first floor of the building, where we're now at, was finished and included a meeting room, kitchen, and engine room. On January 4th, 1954, the company held its first meeting in the new building, ending a stay of 64 years at its Main Street locations.
I don't remember, did you say that property was Dr. Holman's property?
No, that was one of the locations they were looking to purchase.
What was on the property? What was on this property?
It was, to my knowledge, it was nothing. It was barren,
Does anyone know that?
at least at this end.
What was on this property? Nothing. Field, grass.
There was a cut across, we went up to the name.
So you go right up to the dam?
Cut right across.
And who owned?
Thank you, everyone, for coming here today to our first presentations of the businesses downtown in Slatington. It's great to see all of you here. Do any of you have any questions right now about what we presented, or any other question about Slatington? Maybe we can help you with that. Yes.
I just have a question for Tim. I was curious if you know how many quarries were in the vicinity.
I did the quarry part of the 1989 history book. And I took the number, which is pretty accurate. I wasn't going to go to the bank with it, but I counted them all from old geological maps until I came up with 100 quarries. Between Slatington and out to Sagersville, or just out to Slidell. I mean, one of my personal history projects, not that the committee's involved in this yet, but it's going to the old quarries and taking pictures and snooping around on that. And that's why I found the ones out at Heimbach. And some of the big one we always swam in up on 7th Street. Yeah, the big one we swam in there. And I can remember, it's different there. I was trying to find it. But it's a huge car. It's the biggest.
It's all, I went up Elstown Road.
Yeah, I found it.
It's fenced in.
Yeah, I found it. It's right behind the fireworks or something. There's fireworks right behind it. So I drove in there because my granddaughter was interested. She got a new camera. And she's taking a camera course. She wanted, so I drove up there. I wonder if I'm going to have trouble, getting in private property. So I just drove behind the building, the fireworks, and I took pictures of it, and it's huge. Yeah. But that's the first quarry, or one that I swam in. But when we went there, you know, that's a long, long time ago, the road was different going up and so forth, but there's so many up there, there's so, Slaydale, behind Slaydale, not the Pepe's, no, I'm not talking about that big one, I'm talking about the other end of Slaydale. There's a whole bunch of quarries in there.
There's 17 in a row right there.
Is that not many?
I know all of them. I live there all
Who
the
are
way.
you?
From.
You're not Gower, are you?
What?
Guy from.
Well, Gower owns a property. I'm
Yeah,
trying to get
Gower.
on him.
Yeah,
I
Gower.
can't shake anything loose.
Yeah, all the.
I visited, I mailed, I did certified letters, I did everything.
They're up all up there yet. The floors are used, some of them are used for dumping. They shouldn't be.
Well, yeah, I was in there years ago, but I put a sign up, you can't get in there.
Yeah, even up at
That was a booming area.
the old lock and all
Yeah.
that. And the quarry, I'm talking about Slater, there used to be a quarry right where the Acme was.
Yes, that's true, that we know. That we know. Yeah. I'd like to say one more thing about the businesses that are here now. We are internally grateful for all you people that still have businesses in town. When I grew up in the Lehigh Furnace area, which is above Slaydale, we would always come into town to shopping. Well, that was the only place, but I always enjoyed it. It was away from the countryside into the, we used to call it like the little city, the town, the shtetl. So I'm still grateful for the businesses that are here. I admire you for trying to keep a business, because all the little communities have lost a lot of businesses. And it's not due to the business, let me tell you. It's due to our doings, because the way we shop today. And I'm not saying that's always wrong, but I think there's a lot to say when you can go to a little town like we have, Slatington, or any other little town, and do some shopping and get to know some of your proprietors that own the businesses. I think that's so needed today in this world of technology. Now let me tell you one more thing, a little bit about our organization. Coming up in September, we plan to have another cemetery walk. This time it's at the Heidelberg Cemetery. It will be in the Fellowship Hall there. And you're probably wondering, why Heidelberg? Well, Heidelberg played a large role in that area with people coming here to Slatington. And there's a lot of rich history on that cemetery too, like there are in all cemeteries. And I'm inviting you to that. It'll be September 23rd at 2 o'clock. You will be inside, not outside, because some of the graves are, most of the graves that we'll be talking about will be on the older part. And there's no shade there if it's hot or it's raining, so we don't need a rain date. Another thing, we are working on some books yet. Mike, books?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're on target now.
Well, so Judy's been working on a book for a couple
I'll
of years.
get there.
On
I'll get there, Mike.
On the Berkshire. I've been kind of playing around with 2 different books. I've been doing a lot of research on Smith Hall. You know, anyone who's older than like 40 or 50 has been in Slatington has very fond memories of either athletic games at Smith Hall or, you know, different community events or different things. Everyone likes to talk about donkey basketball. But that's one that I personally feel like I need to continue to do a whole lot of research, because the way people talk about Smith Hall, I want to make sure that I get it right. So that's one that I'm working on. The other one that I'm hoping to do for this year, since I've been pretty much the sports guy of our committee, this year is also the 20th anniversary of the Northern Lehigh football team making it all the way to the state final in 2003, and then losing to Darrell Rivas, Al Quippa. So I'm hoping to do a little publication on the 2003 team, to be out, you know, late summer, early fall, still kind of TBA on that with everything. And before I forget, the maps that were stapled in the back when you first came in, if you just Google search Sandburg Fire Maps Slatington, you can find them on Penn State University. Their research library has all of these on there. And you can see uptown, downtown, buildings coming, buildings going. If you zoom in close enough, You'll see what different businesses were, different places, really neat things. So that's my little pitch about that.
Okay, now my pitch is I'm still working on this book, The Berksey, which brought students here into town to Slatington High School, 1919 to 1946. I was treasurer of that group in its last years because I hated to see it disband when there were still some members living that went to the reunions. And they've had reunions, I'd say, for a good 40 years. And now most of them have passed on. But there are very few still living. And I will be writing about the last 10 years of the Berksey reunion. So when you see it out there and it's being publicized, you know what it's about. I will not be going back too far because I really don't know how much was written before. And I don't really know what's out there, even though I've tried to market that and find out that info. So I will be concentrating on the last 10 years. It's very interesting. I'm sure you'll like it. And most of you can relate to it if you're especially from the area. And even if you're not, it's interesting what happened on the Berksey. Now, we do have some refreshments here if you could go back there and help yourselves. Are there any more questions?